After months of rising tensions and the threat of a wider conflict, the United States and Iran have brokered a sudden halt to the fighting. The specifics are laid out in what the U.S. is calling the Islamabad Memorandum of Understanding. Read to reporters by a senior American official, it is an interim agreement built on 14 major points. The foundation of the deal is point 1, an immediate, mutual stop to all military operations. The United States, Iran, and their respective allies are now bound to halt all attacks and completely drop any threats of using force. That ceasefire extends beyond Iran's borders. The text explicitly demands respect for the territorial integrity of Lebanon, where parallel fighting has been taking place. Point 2 transitions from the battlefield to diplomacy. Washington and Tehran formally promise to respect each other's independence and not to interfere in one another's internal affairs. Together, these first 2 points serve one specific function. They freeze the conflict in place, creating the physical safety required for diplomats to negotiate a permanent solution. But that diplomatic window has a strict limit. This timeline tracks the mandate of point 3, which establishes a rigid 60-day deadline for both sides to draft and sign a final peace agreement. Those high-stakes negotiations will be hosted in Switzerland. The deadline can only be extended if both governments mutually consent to give the talks more time. Setting a short, hard deadline turns a fragile ceasefire into a strict mandate for action. The two nations have exactly 2 months to solve decades of gridlock. Looking at this map of the Strait of Hormuz, point 4 outlines the first major concession. The United States will immediately begin pulling back its naval blockade from the Iranian coast. The U.S. military has 30 days to completely clear its forces out of this specific waterway, a critical shipping lane that carries nearly a fifth of the world's daily oil supply. In exchange, under point 5, Iran guarantees that commercial vessels can travel freely and safely between the Persian Gulf and the Sea of Oman, without paying tolls for the duration of the 60-day talks. There is a practical delay built into this step. Because the recent fighting scattered naval mines and military obstacles across the water, Iran notes it could take up to a month to clear the hazards before shipping returns to pre-war volumes. Moving forward, Iran will coordinate with Oman and neighboring Gulf countries to design a long-term system for managing the strait strictly under international law. By rapidly reopening these shipping lanes, the agreement halts a potential energy shortage and keeps global markets from panicking. Point 6 shifts focus directly to Iran's domestic economy. The U.S. and its regional partners are pledging to create a $300 billion reconstruction and economic plan. This table maps out the legal mechanics of point 7, the removal of the international sanctions network. As part of the final agreement, the U.S. agrees to eliminate the UN Security Council, IAEA, and all primary and secondary American sanctions that have restricted Iranian trade. These legal barriers won't vanish overnight. They will be phased out gradually, based on a schedule the two sides will finalize during the upcoming talks. The promise of a $300 billion investment and the eventual total removal of trade restrictions provides the massive financial leverage required to keep Tehran engaged in the diplomatic process. Point 8 addresses the most heavily scrutinized issue in the region. Iran makes a formal, official pledge that it will never develop or obtain nuclear weapons. Instead of forcing Iran to export its existing stockpile of highly enriched uranium, both sides agreed to a process visualized here, called downblending. This means the uranium stays physically inside Iran, but its enrichment level is chemically diluted to a much lower civilian-grade potency. This dilution will happen under the direct physical supervision of inspectors from the International Atomic Energy Agency. Point 9 establishes a mutual holding pattern until a final deal is signed. Iran will freeze all expansion of its nuclear program, and the U.S. will pause any new sanctions or troop deployments to the region. Keeping the nuclear material inside Iran's borders, but heavily diluting its concentration, is the exact technical compromise holding this entire diplomatic effort together. To make sure the agreement holds through the 60-day negotiating period, Point 10 delivers immediate economic relief. The United States Treasury will issue immediate waivers so Iran can legally resume exporting crude oil and petrochemicals. Point 11 clears the way for billions of dollars in frozen Iranian assets held overseas to be unlocked. Washington is issuing the licenses necessary for that money to flow back to beneficiaries selected by Iran's central bank. To ensure neither side cheats on these early steps, Point 12 mandates the creation of a joint monitoring system to verify compliance. Opening the oil taps and unfreezing foreign cash injects a sudden surge of capital directly into the Iranian economy, providing essential financial relief for the public while the politicians negotiate. Which brings us to point 13. With the naval blockade lifting and the markets unfreezing, diplomats will immediately begin drafting the remaining permanent security arrangements. According to point 14, once that final text is ready, it will be handed to the United Nations Security Council, where it is expected to be adopted as a legally binding international resolution. But it is crucial to remember that this document is strictly an interim measure. The hardest, long-term compromises over nuclear energy, deep economic sanctions, and regional security remain completely unresolved. The next 60 days of negotiations in Switzerland a durable peace, or if this temporary ceasefire simply resets the clock for the next conflict.